For 30 years, A&R service Taxi.com has sought to help composers get their music into the hands of music libraries. Now, there are a lot of mixed feelings about Taxi, with some claiming it's a pay-to-play scam while others sing their praises across the internet. And I'm not necessarily here to debate this today, but there's no arguing that some people find great success through Taxi and absolutely swear by it. Well, I sit down and chat with two of our own 52Q's members, Chris Moser and Jeff LaPlante, who seem to have cracked the code. We talk tips, strategies, understanding Taxi's real strengths, and discuss the lessons learned through Taxi's seemingly enigmatic and elusive screening process. Plus, we take a listen to both of their cues, which helped them be named to Taxi's top 10 members list for May of 2022 on this week's episode of the 52Q's podcast. What is happening, everybody? This is Dave Croft, and welcome back to another episode of the 52Q's podcast, a weekly podcast dedicated to all things production and library music, where we talk about industry topics and take deep dives into the different aspects of being a production music composer. Plus, we feature a cue written by a member of the 52Q's community, and as I mentioned this week, we'll be taking a listen to two cues: Spy Thing, a funky jazzy cue written by Chris Moser, and Neon Nights, an 80s-infused pop EDM cue written by Jeff LaPlante. So you definitely want to stick around for that. But if you want to skip over the topic today and get right to those cues, then you can be sure to check out the timestamps in the description. And before we get started, I have to give a special word of thanks to the family, friends, and patrons of 52Q's who help keep the podcast, the channel, and everything here going. See, we are 100% community supported. So if you like what I do here, don't thank me, thank them. And if you want to learn more about how you can help support 52Q's and unlock extra perks like music production, live streams, workshops, lesson discounts, feedback sessions, and much more, then click the links in the description or stick around, because we're going to be talking a little bit more about that later in today's episode. So, as I mentioned in the intro, Taxi seems to be this thing which sparks a ton of debate across the internet. And, I've found success on my own with Taxi. There are relationships that I have today that I work with that are a direct result of submitting my music through Taxi. And it's something that comes up constantly. How do we get music into the hands of music libraries? How do we make those relationships? How do we network? How do we find homes for our music? And Taxi.com is one of the more effective ways to get that ball rolling. But it's not always sunshine and roses. And over the last, I would say, 3 months, I feel like I've gotten a lot of feedback from students who seem to be hitting a brick wall with Taxi. So when I saw two of our own community members show up on Taxi's top 10 members list for May of 2022, I had to sit down and talk with them. So here is my recent interview with Chris Moser and Jeff LaPlante, who seemed to have cracked the code. So I thought, what better way to talk about tips, strategies, techniques for conquering Taxi. And I say conquering, but really it's just, Taxi seems to be kind of an enigma to so many folks. And I brought two people who are community members, 52Q's community members, and were featured in the top 10 from May 2022. I want to welcome Chris Moser and Jeff LaPlante to the podcast. What is up, gentlemen?
Hi, everybody.
Hey.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so good to have you here. And the first question I want to ask, we'll start with you, Chris, is what does top 10 mean? When Taxi says, hey, you're placed in the top 10, do you get like a notification? Does it mean number of downloads, or is it something that was picked by the staff?
Yeah, as far as I know, it's just a staff pick. They they just put like 10 tracks together that they stumbled over him and they liked them and they thought, okay, let's feature this artist and tracks, but it has no other meaning that they were like top 10 or whatever forwarded the most. It's just a random pick from the staff,
Gotcha. And Jeff, same for you. Kind of, it wasn't like the number of downloads or anything. It was just staff.
No, I think they do it every month where the screeners, as they're doing their critiques, they'll flag certain tracks that they like the best and send those out to, I guess, a panel, which gets it down to the top 10 for the month.
Mm-hmm.
And then on our end, we just get an email saying, hey, would it be okay if we feature your track on the top 10 this month? And, of course, yeah, go ahead.
Well, and even that is no small feat, considering the number of submissions that Taxi gets,
Mm-hmm.
the number of forwards that Taxi puts to get on the radar of screeners is no small feat, and I know you both are active in the forums, lots of things going on there. And so, Jeff, starting with you, how long have you been with Taxi, and what are some of the key takeaways, or maybe talk about your journey to really finding success with Taxi?
Well, this time around, it's been about a year and a half, and I say this is probably the first time that I've done Taxi with fidelity, did it the right way. I've been a Taxi member probably 3 or 4 times in the past 10 years, but this is the only time that I've done it correctly. The other times, I had just finished an album with my band, and I was like, all right, we have these 12 tracks. Let's see if we could get them out to the public. And I was just working with 12, and of course, the rejections start coming, the critiques start coming. Oh, in verse number 2, you got to change this line, or we don't like the saxophone part in the intro. And by that time, my band has been out of the studio now for months. We have no way of going back just to change one lyric, so I'm stuck getting rejections and critiques for as long as I'm a Taxi member, that album run. And then, of course, a couple of years later, the band goes back into the studio, and I'm like, okay, these are even better than the last set of 12 songs. Let's try Taxi again. And then the same thing just keeps on happening. And eventually you do kind of give up and get discouraged. This time around, I'm just by myself. I'm doing instrumental cues. Don't have to worry about changing lyrics around. It's just proven to be much better for me because in my studio, I can go and make a little small tweak and then resubmit it a couple days later. To a different listing, obviously.
So when you say doing it correctly, and I'm doing big air quotes in case you're listening to the podcast, what does that mean? What does doing it correctly mean to you?
Well, first I had to educate myself, which I had never done before. So first thing I did was I bought Steve Barton's book, right? And then I bought the Demystifying the Genre and Demystifying the Cue. Those are Dean's books. Both great guys, Taxi success stories. They're on the forums. They're on Facebook, social media. So I read everything and anything I could about television production music. Also studying the Forwards blog, studying song structure, knowing what it means to tell a story with your music, as opposed to getting the critiques that you're too repetitive. Also, a big thing for me is I'm finally using the correct sounds. I'm using Omnisphere. I'm using a lot of sounds from Splice. I'm using sounds from Output. Before that, I just never had the means to purchase the correct sounds. For a long time in my 20s, I didn't have much money to buy the equipment that I needed. In my 30s, I started my family, so I didn't have time to produce the music. Now, all of a sudden, in my 40s, I have the means financially to buy the gear that I need, and I have the time to do it because now my kids are in their teen years. So everything's kind of coming together.
Chris, same question. Same question for you. Your journey to Taxi. How long have you been? And what are some of the takeaways that you found through your process with Taxi?
Okay, I joined Taxi January last year, and I think my first submission was in February last year. And first of all, I mean, for my defense, I have to say all my life was music, composing, producing, being a musician, teaching music. So I didn't have to start from scratch. So I came already with I could bring a lot to the table, But for me, it was totally clear from the beginning. I had to really inform myself what is the format, Even though I have been in production music in the 90s, I had my own company, my own studio. I had a music studio, and I was doing a lot of corporate work, corporate music. But things have changed so dramatically in the last 2 decades that I had to really get into like what's the format, edit points and all these kind of things. I had to study that. And I basically, when I wasn't writing and when I wasn't working or, being with my family, I was listening to podcasts and, I was really educating myself. And then I think the most important thing is to study, to grow, and just spit out a quantity of tracks. I mean, I made in my first year 144 submissions in my first year. And I got 67 forwards from that 144 submissions. And that's what brought me all these contacts. And from now on, I mean, I'm not doing that many submissions anymore because I have now relationships with libraries where they ask me to do an album for this and that. And so for me, that was the important thing, to study, to really follow what they tell you to do, but since I was used to do that, I had my clients who told me, I absolutely need a saxophone on this track, but I was like, it doesn't really fit at all, but I gave it to him, anyway,
right. They want a sax, they get a sax.
They want a sax, I gave him a sax. Doesn't fit at all, but I know how to work for clients. I know how to, I want to be artsy. Of course, everybody is an artist, but I can put that aside and, just do my job to be the solution to the problem.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I immediately understood. And quantity. I think if you want to make Taxi work, you can't submit one track every 3 months. It's not gonna pay off. You have to really do as much as possible. And in the forum they ask, can I submit a track more than once? Heck yeah! I mean, I submitted some tracks. I think 20 times. I can't even count it anymore. Some tracks got forwarded 6 times. Can you imagine? I've never heard anything. So it's crazy, but and then I submit one track and I get a deal, So you can't really say, if I forward a track 3 times, I will definitely get signed, So you have to, it's really crazy and it's strange and it's a jungle. You don't really know what's behind the next tree, So, but
yeah.
I love it.
So what really drew you first to Taxi? What pulled you out of, here I'm doing my thing, I'm doing my studio thing, and this is for Chris, you or Jeff, into hey, production music, mm-hmm. and now I want to look at this whole other side of the business. What really originally drew you to that?
Well, the thing is, I left full-time producing music a long time ago. I was also kind of tired. I was always working by myself. I had for 12 years, I was basically just composing and producing music, and I was really tired of it. I basically burned out, And then I switched. I started to teach. I made a teacher's degree in university, and I started to teach. I had a family like Jeff, and the whole 9 yards. And but I was always, still producing people. I was a working musician. I had a duo with my wife. My wife is a musician as well, so we were doing stuff together. I was I was MD of a contemporary gospel project. All these kind of things all along. I was on the side of my job, of my music teaching job. I was always doing music. And then COVID came, and everything just stopped. Boom, And first I was like, oh my God, what are we going to do? We can't perform anymore. We can't do this project, that project. And then the first year was just kind of like a coma, like, what's happening, And then at the end of the first COVID year, I was like, I just got this feeling, hey man, I have all this creative energy, what would be the best way to get it out there? And I read Taxi, and it was like a 1 minute decision, okay, I'm going to start this thing, this totally appeals to me. It resonates with me. Maybe because, we looked into Taxi like 20 years ago, but it was more like this band song thing, which we weren't into that, we weren't into that, my wife and me. But this time I was like, okay, let me do this thing, this sounds exactly what I need, and then I just big dive into it, and just full force try to do it, And
so it was the lockdown during COVID, and you were thinking, okay, there's got to be other ways that don't involve performing, don't involve like people coming to the studio or anything.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Exactly.
Jeff, what about you? What brought you originally to Taxi?
Yeah, so this time around, it was the same kind of thing. I teach second grade, so that's my day job. During this, I've always had summers off to write some music. But when everything shut down and I didn't have to go to school in the fall, it was like, okay, I'm teaching remotely, but at the end of the day, I still have to create something. Okay, so I'm home. I can't go out to a restaurant. Everything's closed. What am I going to do? So I think for 6 months, I did a track every day. So
wow.
That's huge output.
Maybe 175 days in a row, I did 1 cue per day. It was crazy. Looking back on it, like none of them, maybe 1 or 2 of them are signed now. So it was a learning process for me, like doing those first 175 to 200 and getting the critiques and finding out what I was doing wrong helped me a lot, because now I know what not to do. Since January of this year, I've written, I think, 85 already, and all 85 are signed already.
Wow.
So
were those all through fresh Taxi submissions, or were those all now that you have relationships with libraries through Taxi and now they're gone out the door?
Through relationships that I made through a single Taxi forward.
Gotcha.
One company in particular, it was one Taxi forward way back, probably at the end of 2020, and now I've written 6 albums for them of 10 cues each. And then a couple other Taxi forwards led me to the same kind of thing, where one song gets forwarded, but it creates the relationship. So 1 forward leads to 10 tracks being signed.
Right.
That's happened like 3 or 4 times for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's been my experience with Taxi as well. One forward leads to, hey, I need 12 more or whatever, and then more albums. And that same publisher, just within the last 2 months, we've kicked up the relationship again, and he's ordered another album. And that's kind of that's awesome. How I view Taxi, not like a one-to-one kind of, this got forwarded, this made air, this made me this much money. It's more using Taxi as a publicity tool or publicist to create relationships. And so it sounds like for both of you, maybe that's the strategy, as opposed to just completely thinking of your forwards as one-to-one royalty payments.
Yeah, so it's like I view it as a barometer to find out if your stuff is good enough. Once I started getting forwarded a lot, I knew my stuff was ready to be pitched to other companies. So I also started pitching my stuff without Taxi's help, and just finding websites or making connections via social media. and finding out names of companies or music libraries and sending, an initial email. And I've made a few connections just that way. Where
Mm-hmm.
if I didn't go through the whole taxi thing to get my stuff up to par, if I sent that older music to these companies, cold call basically, they would have rejected it immediately and say,
Yeah.
no, this is not what we're looking for. It's not the right format. There are no edit points. There's a lot of things that go into making a cue licensable. And
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that at first, you know.
Mm.
Um, it's really cool now. I could go back to that first 175 that I did wrong and go in and make the edit points and change little things here and there. So it's not a total waste. I
Yeah.
still, when I only have an hour to do something as opposed to my 4 hour block, I usually take 4 hours per cue. If I
Mm.
only have an hour, sometimes I'll go back to one of those older ones and see if I can
Yeah.
fix it.
Just
Yeah.
polish them up, man. No good cue goes unused. Just stick it in your catalog, and you never know when it's gonna come back. Chris, same kind of thing. Are you doing more fresh taxi submissions these days, or are you doing more now that the ball is rolling with these libraries?
No, I'm doing more library stuff, direct, requests for tracks or albums right now. But, I have a little story about this whole relationship building. I mean, I got the first request for or to sign a contract pretty early in the game, but it turned out to be a complete waste of time. It was nothing. I mean, I can't even. They don't even answer emails anymore. I have tried to. It's totally. They I don't know. They went somewhere next atmosphere galaxy.
Yeah.
Other companies called me out. I mean, wrote me. They wanted to sign these 2 forwards they got from me. They signed the 2 tracks. Haven't heard from them since. They are not on an album that they released. They're just like lost in space. And funnily, the best contacts I got through the forward block from Taxi. One particular guy saw my you can write which tracks were forwarded in the forward block, and he listened to these tracks and he said, hey, I like the stuff, and funnily his initial email landed in the spam. So like a week later, I see this email in my spam. I'm like, oh my God, this guy is interested in it. And that is turned out to be the best relationship so far,
That never dawned on me, because I usually don't put my music, to be like publicly listenable or whatever.
Yeah,
I don't know why. There's no reason.
I know.
But I didn't even think about other libraries watching the forward blogs and creating contacts.
I was shocked. I was shocked.
Taxi never sees that $5 for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the second guy who contacted me is another owner of a library, and he just liked the way I present myself in the forward block or in the taxi forum, And he said, "Oh, I like the way you give props to other people. I listened to some of your tracks in the forward block. Hey, let's talk, And yesterday he asked me for a 16 to 20 track album, to make it a 16 to 20 track album. I like, heck yeah, but no direct forward, just all indirectly in this jungle of taxi, I call it jungle, but it's really a jungle because you don't know what's behind the next tree,
Yeah, yeah, and which leads me to another question, Jeff. Kind of going off of what you were saying, what are some of those common mistakes that you learned in those 175? And Chris, you can jump in as well.
Sure.
Some of the things that you learned either through rejections, through the feedback, and then the returns. What were some of the things that you saw that you had to overcome in your queues?
So I'll say the first thing is the types of sounds you're using. Like I have this $3,000 Korg Kronos keyboard, and I thought, okay, I've got the best keyboard, but the sounds on here aren't, the latest sounds. I was like, how could a $3,000 keyboard not have the best, but the technology is moving so fast that, the best sounds right now, whether you want to believe it or not, is virtual instruments.
Yeah.
You know, and
Give
I
it
was
give it
like,
another
okay,
20
well,
give it another 20 years, then now those Korg sounds are going to be vintage and retro,
right,
and then you'll be able to use
Yeah.
that.
right. So
Yeah.
for a long time, I was like, okay, I have the best keyboard on the market. My sound, they're not going to get those comments anymore. But lo and behold, I did. I say your sounds aren't up to date. I said, well,
Hmm.
where are these? Where's the holy grail of sounds? Well, then I discovered, Omnisphere has some really good sounds that are good for my genre of music, which is kind of like retro 80s pop, because 80s sounds are coming back.
Hmm.
Thank goodness. That's my love and my passion. So I'm in a really good place right now that the sounds that I love are in style. I might not be so successful in another 5, 10 years, but right now, you listen to The Weeknd and Dua Lipa.
Oh,
Those
absolutely.
80s synth sounds and that's the kind of stuff I love.
Hmm.
So I'm able to write the kind of music that I would listen to myself right now, which is great. So the sounds is one thing. Splice is like an endless world of the most current sounds, and I don't take loops and put them in my music. I From Dave's suggestion, I got this thing called Serato Sample,
Serato
right?
sample. Yep.
Oh my God, this thing, I never knew how to make an 808 bass sound. I was like, I need that sound. Where is it? Well, now I can take a one-shot 808 from Splice, put it on Serato, pitch it. So now I have a whole 12 note octave of 808 bass.
Yep.
It's a no-brainer. Now all of a sudden, now I have that most current banging bass sound. Kronos could never give me that.
And with because it's a one shot, the one shot is like mastered with all the effects and everything. It's so
Right.
easy to mix. You don't have to like dump like processing and,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
compressors and all. It's just easy to use. Yes, thank you. Woo,
Hmm.
we'll put
Yeah,
a link to that Serato sample video. And by the way, the
and
books and everything you mentioned, we'll have links to all of this in the show notes as well.
another one is the song structure. Too repetitive is a very, very big comment that taxi members will get. So for a long time, I was like, okay, I'm not going to make my stuff repetitive, so I'm going to have an A section, then a B section, then a C, like verse, chorus, bridge, verse, chorus, but it doesn't work that
Mm.
way. In television music, they want A minus, B, A plus, A plus plus. So you've got like 4 different A sections. One would
Yeah.
think that was repetitive, but it's not,
It's all
because each
gradations
of
of
those A
energy.
sections are different variations of that A section that the music supervisor can choose which one they like best and put that in the show. So it goes against your normal definition of repetitive, because one would think if you have 4 different A sections in the same piece of music, that's repetitive. But in production music, it's not. That's what they're
Yeah,
looking for.
absolutely. Chris, what were some common mistakes that because you're relatively new to the taxi, not to
Hmm.
music production itself, but what were some common mistakes that you had to work through early on?
Yeah, I think consistency was one thing, to keep the same mood, the same vibe throughout the whole track, like edit points, missing edit points maybe was one thing, yeah, that was basically the stuff that I had to learn, and also just to strip it down, not be too complicated, harmony stuff, just the usual stuff that they say on the podcast, that they repeat over and over and over again. It's all out there. Just have to copy it. But having said that, I am kind of shocked how one library, they love the kind of crazy stuff I'm doing, and I keep sending this guy tracks, and I'm like, but I'm sure this one is is out there. I'm sure it's too crazy. And he said, no, I'm all about getting new stuff out there, not the same old. So I'm not, I'm sitting here and saying I want to do licensable tracks, but is it maybe over with this A minus, B, A plus plus? I'm sure they're going to need that too, but and finally, to the other library, with the other library, they signed like all the tracks that got rejected from Tax. He loved them. Say, okay, cool. Just take the bass drum bit down a bit, and then we good to go.
So one of the things that is just inherent in being a Taxi member and submitting things and all of that is the return. The inevitable, you will get a return. Any Taxi person I've ever met across the years that I've known about him, nobody has never gotten a return. And so, Chris, how did you early on, or how do you process when you get that return? Because it can be ego bruising. It could be a little soul crushing, especially if you're getting return after return after return. So while I know that getting a forward and getting something signed is salve to that bruised ego, but how do you handle the return and the rejection?
Funnily, my first submission was a forward. I was like, 11 returns.
After
that, like return, reject. It was like, okay, let's get back to the drawing board. Yeah, I mean, what should I say? I always felt I am always feeling like a student, and I will never cease to feel like a student. You always have to learn, and so for me, a rejection was, okay, what is happening? I'm only get kind of frustrated if I don't understand the reasons, if I'm like, what is he talking about? I don't get it, But maybe, after the third or the fourth rejection, then I start to finally understand the language, what do they mean with this and that, and I always felt like it's a blessing, it's a blessing. I mean, these are highly professional people. They give you advice, I mean, come on, this is gold. That's gold, So, and as soon as you get only forwards, you better quit Tax, I mean, what's the point,
Yeah.
I think you have reached a level where you don't need anybody.
I think that's a really good outlook. When you get that return, you kind of treat it like an educational moment. I recently got some feedback from a library, and the publisher, this was the one that was a Taxi forward from years ago. I did some stuff and then he's returned, and it was really in depth and called me out on, or rather, he called attention to some blind spots that I didn't even know I had. And so my first reaction was like, oh, how is this not automatically approved? But then I thought, this guy's giving me, and he recorded like a 5-minute audio thing, and he pointed out, I'm like, this is like a free lesson. This is a free lesson. What about you, Jeff? How did you handle those early returns and the 175 cues? That's amazing. I did nothing during my lockdown. I learned how to grill and smoke ribs, but I certainly wasn't nearly as productive as you were. But how did you handle those early returns?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely wasn't 175 returns.
Well, that's good.
But most of the stuff I submitted was returned. And yeah, I mean, I used to get angry. Your mind goes to, the screener doesn't know what he's talking about, and my stuff's good. But now, as I listen back to those tracks, I wouldn't forward them either. So the screener was right. Like I didn't have the structure down. My sounds weren't good enough. And that only comes with time before you kind of realize, the screener was right in that situation. So instead of getting angry and giving up, you kind of have to view it as, you're in grad school and you get a paper back and the professor tells you what's wrong with it. And use that information to do a better job next time. And if you're writing a lot, and this goes back to what Chris was saying, if you're cranking out 100 to 200 tracks a year, you have a lot of opportunities to fix those mistakes.
Mm.
You're only doing 10 songs with your band every 5 years. There's no opportunity to go back and fix what needs to be fixed.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. One of the comments that I've seen across, the internet verse is how Taxi could feel like a pay to play. It could feel. I remember the early Taxi days. The website. They've since really updated it, but it felt a little sketch, right? So, do you have any comments for any folks who might, maybe because they're feeling the burn from some rejections, or maybe they don't kind of see the value in paying somebody to evaluate your music and forward it along? Mm-hmm. Do you have any input for those folks who maybe just would think that something like Taxi isn't worth it, Chris?
Yeah, well, first off, I think a rejection is, you don't have to take it personally, because these screeners, they don't know you from a bag of beans in China. It's like, they have no idea who you are. They listen to your music, totally detached from your person, and they're just critiquing your music, So it's nothing personal. It's not like, oh, here comes Chris again, with his funky tracks, none of that, I think this is one very important thing to remember. What was the question again? Sorry.
Oh, the question is do you have anything to say to folks who feel like maybe Taxi is pay to play?
Okay. Right. The other very important thing I would like to say, I heard also this topic with Jesse, where he thinks, the best way actually should be, you research the library that fits best for you. You make a 10-track album, you pitch it. If they like it, good. If they don't like it, you go to the next library. I think this would be the best way if you have time, if you have only time to do music, if you don't have anything besides it, then you can get on the internet, research, write, answer, and all this kind of stuff, But if you don't have time, like most of us have a job, have family, have a house, have a car to pay for, I think Taxi is the highway, I mean, they provide you with opportunities, real opportunities. This is a company looking for a genre, for a track in that style, and you can give your best, and try to do that, and you have to do it over and over. It's just like, what's the mantra? Is just write, submit, forget, repeat.
Repeat. Yep, that's Dean's. Yeah,
and you have to go by that. Otherwise, it's not going to work. It's just not going to work. Go back, listen to the critiques, try to better yourself, because you have to just realize one thing: these guys who do the critique, even if sometimes you don't agree or you don't understand really, they're coming from a good place. They don't want to put you down. They want you to succeed, basically. Because if nobody succeeds on Taxi, they can pack it up, and go home. I mean,
oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think if the company was a scam, I don't think it would have been around nearly as long as it has been, and it's clearly working for folks. Jeff, did you have any thoughts on that?
I think the most important thing is my music would not be as good of a quality as it is right now without Taxi. There's no question in my mind that I would not have learned the stuff that I needed to learn to get these industry connections if Taxi wasn't around. And honestly, it does work. Three out of 6 music libraries that I'm working with right now are from Taxi forwards.
Yeah,
I wouldn't have had those connections. And I wouldn't have had the other 3 either if my music was still sounding like it was 2 years ago.
So that's kind of like,
that's like Chris's
some of
those tracks.
Yeah, it's like Chris was mentioning the indirect benefit of being a taxi member. And I know if you're listening to this, you're like, okay, all right, this isn't a taxi commercial. We're not sponsored by taxi. I don't know, Michael from, what'd you say, a bag of what? Gummy bears?
A bag of beans in China. That's what my wife, my wife is from Philadelphia, so these are all things that I picked up.
So yeah, this isn't a commercial for taxi. If anything, it's a rebuttal to folks who would like to kind of bag on it. And it's not for everybody. Taxi isn't for everybody. Mm-hmm. And if you have the time, Chris, like you were saying, if you have the time to sit there and pore over Google and research all that stuff, or Jeff, if you have the ability to crank out all those cues, 175, and be able to self-reflect on those, and you're able to do that, I'm not able to do that, then go for it. But what I really want the takeaway from anybody listening to this is that we have a couple of people here who have seemingly, in a relatively short amount of time, kind of cracked the code on taxi. And I have students who have had zero luck with taxi, and maybe they point their energy somewhere else. That's totally fine. Mm-hmm. But Jeff, Chris, you guys have, like I said, you've kind of cracked the code. And we're going to listen to, on the other side of the break here, we're going to listen to Spy Thing by Chris, and we're going to listen to Neon Nights by Jeff. And I'm not going to critique them. I'm not going to, because they've already gone through. What else can I say? But, here on the podcast, we feature cues written by members of the 52 Cues community. And I want to feature these cues because, like I said at the top of the interview here, getting recognized by taxi is no small feat. And congratulations to both of you. I think you having featured, I believe I featured both of your cues on a 52 Cues podcast, and you are well deserving of all the success, all the forwards, and it was an absolute pleasure finally, seeing you, putting a moving picture to the thumbnail avatar. But Chris, Jeff, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure.
Hey, y'all. I'm Shannon Croft, and I want to tell you that the 52 Cues podcast is made possible by viewers and listeners just like you, composers and producers who are looking for a better way to connect and collaborate. You see, 52 Cues isn't just another website selling static, pre-recorded videos to a mass audience. It's a fun, vibrant, and positive community that comes together online for sharing cues, getting feedback, and discussing what's up in the production music industry. You'll find both personalized feedback and live interaction, which are the best and fastest ways to grow your skills and earn more placements. The best part is that the 52 Cues community is absolutely free. And when you're ready to take your career to the next level, we offer friends and family subscriptions, which unlock weekly live streams, live interactive group feedback sessions, monthly interactive workshops, and more. Head over to 52cues.com and sign up today. And while you're there, check out our personalized feedback videos, private lessons, and of course, merch. I can't wait to see you at 52cues.com.
That was Spy Thing by Chris Moser. And we've had both Chris and Jeff on the podcast before. And I remember when we had Chris on and he sent one of his cues in for the weekly threads. And I remember saying, if this doesn't get forwarded, then Taxi is truly broken. And come to find out, that did get forwarded, and I think it might have gotten signed, which is, this cue is called Spy Thing, and the S means that it has been signed. So not only was it a forward, but it got signed, and off they go. So Chris, fantastic job. I know that you play a lot of your own instruments and everything, and guitar and all of that, and so stellar work. And so really, really appreciate you sending that along. And next, I want to take a listen to Neon Nights by Jeff LaPlante, another cue that got forwarded along. Just like with Spy Thing, it's no mystery why that got forwarded, and I love that it's synthwave-ish. It's 80s infused without trying to sound like it came, off of a VCR tape or something like that. It feels like a modern interpretation of the synthwave aesthetic, and again, it's no wonder why both of these got sent along. And so thank you, Chris and Jeff. Thank you so much for spending time with me and talking about your journey in Taxi and what is working for you. I would love to hear from you. Are you a Taxi member? Do you have any success stories from Taxi, or do you have any horror stories from Taxi? I'm kind of on the bubble right now with Taxi, and I think I have a video coming up about it. And as far as my journey with Taxi and how I am using it currently, and so again, I think that's a video that's brewing, or an episode that is brewing. But I would absolutely love to hear from you. Like I also mentioned earlier, Chris and Jeff are both members of the 52 Cues community. We are a collective of composers looking to improve ourselves by posting our cues up for feedback, leaving feedback, giving feedback. It's a really super welcoming community, and I absolutely hope to see you there. Why don't you join us? It's free, and we would love to have you. And again, none of this would be possible without the support of the family, friends, and patrons of 52 Cues who help keeps all of that happening. And if that's something that you want to help along, then check out all the links in the description below. Otherwise, I think that's going to do it for us. Thank you so much for joining me for today's episode. It was great having you. And once again, would love to hear your Taxi story. But that's going to do it for me today. Until next time, peace. The 52 Cues podcast is copyright 2022 Dave Croft, all rights reserved. The music played on the podcast is copyright of their respective owners and is used for educational purposes only. For more information, including joining the 52 Cues community and submitting your cue for consideration on the podcast, head over to 52cues.com.